Good evening. How are you all tonight? I'd like to welcome you all to the program of the Barron County Historical Society. It's nice to see all of these folks here. To be together is kind of nice again, but also to enjoy a program by Maddie Coomer. Maddie was the recipient of our Mabel Shelby Wells Scholarship last year, and of course COVID meant that we didn't have any meetings, and that also meant that Maddie could not come and share her information with us that comes along with the scholarship. But we're glad that she can come tonight, and before we start with that, I'll mention if you're not a member of the Barron County Historical Society, there are forms to join back on the back table, and we'd be glad to have you join us. We meet roughly every month with the exception of December and November, but we would appreciate you all joining us. Maddie, we're so pleased to have you here. We've been waiting over a year. And I will turn that over to her and let her.
So I'm going to warm up my laptop real quick.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to talk where everybody can hear me. But like you said, my name's Maddie Coomer. I'm 19. I just finished my first year at Lindsey Wilson College, so I'll be a sophomore next year there. I'm studying both English and Christian ministry, so what I do is read all day long every day and write papers. But so this project that I've done, I actually completed as an assignment for Mr. Steenbergen's AP US History class, and so I've always been interested in family history types things, but I'd never really delved into it very much. So I used his assignment as an opportunity to do that. And about that same time, for Christmas, my grandmother gave me a Ancestry DNA kit for Christmas, and so I was pretty excited about that. And so I did all of this around the same time, so it worked out really well. So the information that I'm gonna show you, it says on the slide here, but I've gotten it from a combination of Ancestry.com and documents I found there, information and interviews that I did with my family members, and as well as documents that they were able to give me that had just been handed down or that they collected over the years. So first thing I wanted to show you was what I got from my Ancestry DNA. I thought that was super interesting, but nothing really surprised me there. Very Western European, and actually it just got updated the other day, and it added that I was Welsh, 4% Welsh, so that's interesting. The one that I was really excited about is that it told me I was 7% Norwegian. That was the one I was not expecting, but that was just super interesting. It didn't really tell me anything that I didn't already guess, I suppose, but that was a pretty neat thing to do that I did probably 2 years ago now. So I'm going to start with the most current generations and just move back in history. So these are my parents, Sarah and Jason. They're both here tonight. They are both originally from Cave City. They both attended Caverna schools, and both went to the University of Louisville. My dad graduated from University of Louisville Dental School, and my mom graduated from the U of L from the dental hygiene program. So lots of teeth. I will not be continuing that legacy, unfortunately. In the medical field, I stayed far away from that, as you can tell. But they were married in 1998, so they've been married for 23 years now. It'll be 24 this year, I guess. So they worked together in a dental practice for, I guess, 12 or 13 years, something like that. But so yeah, that legacy of dentistry is strong there. But I have two wonderful parents. This was a trip that we took, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago to Colorado So I love doing things like that with my family, as well as my brother and sister. I guess I should mention that, Julia and Hayden. But that's a little bit about my immediate family. And so these are just some pictures of my mom and dad when they were dating in high school, prom, and then their wedding photo. And then this was them probably 5 or 6 years ago. So they've known each other longer than they haven't, I guess. A lot longer than they have not known each other. So I've just decided, I organized the project. I'm basically tracing 4 paths through my family history. My maternal and paternal sides, but there's basically 4 branches, if that makes sense. So first I'm going to trace my maternal grandmother's, Sharon. She's also here tonight, the Hardys side. So that's what I looked at first. So my grandmother Sharon Hardy's from Washington, Indiana. She and her family lived on a farm, but they later moved off in her later life. She attended Washington High School. That's her, I guess, senior photo. I'm not sure. But she was definitely involved in a lot of things, a lot of clubs. There's a long list there. But she likes the arts and she played French horn. And so I think I probably get some of my artistic interests and abilities from her. But she also attended, I guess, a satellite campus kind of thing of the University of Louisville in X-ray Tech, and she married my grandfather Sherman in 1962. They were both working together in a hospital and met there. So she still uses those talents that she was interested in high school. She's a part of a sewing group that meets every week and sews things to send to kids in Honduras, where she served in mission teams. I don't even know how many years, so many years, just sewing things, and she's a great painter. She has quilted all of her granddaughters a quilt. I think you've gotten to all of them now. Yeah, and so we all have a quilt for Meemaw, and all the grandsons all have a painting that she did for them. So that's a really awesome thing that we get to keep from her. This is that same trip to Colorado with her down there. So going back farther on the Hardy side, Meemaw's parents were Thomas Hardy and Marjorie Hopewell, and so Grandpa Hardy worked for a lumber company, later worked at as a maintenance man in the schools, and so did Grandma Hardy after a while. My mom, when I was doing this project, said that she always remembered Grandma Hardy being a really great storyteller, and I definitely think I see that in my cousin, Sydney. I think that trait got passed down to her, but as I did this, it was cool to see those connections that, like, people, our generation, these are the grandkids, got some of those traits that even though I didn't get to meet them, I can see that. But that's a photo of them together, and then this is my mom, Sarah, and Grandpa Hardy. And then as in my ancestry stuff, I got a lot of draft cards for the men, so I thought that was kind of neat. I don't think he actually served, but of course everybody had to fill it out. And then Marjorie, which was Meemaw's mother, were the Hopewells, and so I went into a little bit on them. Ernest Hopewell and Olive Stone. It was funny because everyone always called her Opal Stone, and so I went back when I was going through this. I was like, so who's Olive and who's Opal? Well, apparently they were the same person, and then my mom didn't even know that was her real name. So, but as far as Ernest, Meemaw talks about him as a quiet man that loved to read and that would give his grandkids books for Christmas, which is another cool connection because I also really enjoy reading, which I think was a really cool legacy for him. Opal was a stay-at-home mom, but she also worked in a factory during World War II. And then I was kind of unsure about it, but it may be that Ernest's parents were the generation in that side of the family that migrated over to the United States. And I really love this picture. I think that's so neat. Apparently his nickname was Red. I guess he had red hair, I'm not sure. But I think it's funny that in the description of him it tells that he was what does it say? Bright as a dollar, and that he liked riding around town late at night with his friend. So it's just funny things like that you would never get without this kind of information. But a little bit farther back on the Hardy side, Thomas Hardy's parents were James Hardy and Anna Purcell. So James, the name James, was passed down to my grandmother's brother. We call him Jim Hardy. But they are my great-great-grandparents, and so I've got an arrow pointing to James there in this picture with his brothers. I got that from a family document. I think that's pretty neat. But then his parents, James's parents were William Wallace Hardy and Mary Maria. They had 9 children. He was one of 9 children. And from the family documents that I saw, he was apparently a great reader, really influenced by literature, and got a really good education, which is really cool. And I included these quotes in my project from the documents that I had, because I just thought they were so neat. But his daughter, William's daughter, wrote that he loved poetry, and he would just go throughout the house reciting poetry all day. And isn't that such like a 1800s, 1900s thing to do? I think of all of like the British TV shows that I love to watch, and that just sounds like something they would do in those shows, but I thought that was pretty cool. And then this other passage that she wrote about him reading a passage in the Bible that said, "Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live." And apparently that was not very long before he passed away, and so that was really impactful to him. And so just this beautiful line that she wrote, that it says, a few days before his going, the sun shone in the west living room window and reflected across his bed in the bedroom. He caught the light in a marvelous way and said that it was a special light shining for him. I don't know, that's a really touching passage that I found. But this is their family. So Jim, my ancestor, is the tall one in the back there of all the children. And then on the bottom photos, when they're older, he's the one on the front row in the left beside his father. So those are some really neat old family photos. I love to see the clothing that they're wearing. They're always so dressed up. So this is some of the really old information that I found on the Hardys. I thought it was really incredible that they had information this far back, but my 4th great-grandparents were Charles William Timewell Hardy and Isabella Wallace. So they were from England, or from Europe, Western Europe. And about Charles, there's a story that he fell from the 4th story of his father's warehouse as a teen and suffered from that from the rest of his life. When he was young, he moved to the United States with his brother and became an apprentice cabinet maker. And apparently he was of the top order in that his work was very fine. And it worked out well for him, because this story that I have on the right, another passage that I took from a family document, William Wallace, a Scotch man, found his way to Cincinnati, and his daughters were running a boarding house. And so without reading this whole thing, Charles had made he had gone to the boarding house and apparently thought that this daughter was very, very attractive. Okay, and so he decided to go back. He kept going back and seeing her, and he came in with a carved wooden book that he had made, even though it wasn't really a book, and she had seen it in his pocket and was like, "What is that?" And he gave it to her, and he had created this little wooden book that had her name engraved in it. And so they later got married, and that was that, I guess. But that was another neat story. And so this is their marriage certificate that I found. They were married in November 1846. So that is a neat find there. And so in the farthest reaches that I could find, my family, James Henry Hardy and Mary Timewell, were married in Longacre, England. And so it said that Henry was in the English army and served under General Wellington. So there's some English history there, which excites me because I love all things British. So now I'm going to move to my maternal grandfather's side. I call him Papa, Sherman Ballou. So this is Sherman, my grandfather. That photo is of him when he was a student in the U of L School of Dentistry. I told you there's a lot lot of dentistry, a lot of family members in dentistry. But he was born in Adair County in 1938 to Estill and Mary Ballou. I got to interview Mima and Papa when I was doing this project, and they got to tell me a lot of stories that I hadn't heard from when they were growing up. And so he told me about Papa told me about the school that he went to and riding his bike to school. And so when he got done with high school, he went to what was then Eastern Kentucky State Teachers College, which is now EKU, and got a degree in chemistry. So he went on to the University of Louisville, and that's where he met my grandmother. And that's us, me and my siblings with him about 2 or 3 years ago. So this is one of those stories that I'd never heard. I asked Papa, like, how did you pick to become a dentist? Because obviously I would never pick that, as we know. But so he said that some friends had sort of inspired him to do that. And then he told me a story of being at Eastern and being in a room full of people. And he said that they had everybody's transcripts down at the bottom of the auditorium, and that they came up and told them what they were interested in. And so Papa decided to go after something in pre-med. And so the person apparently told him that based on his transcript, he maybe should not try the pre-dental route. And so he apparently told him, or asked him, will you at least let me try? And so the rest is history. He graduated from the U of L dental school and became a dentist, a pretty successful dentist. So that's a good story of overcoming the odds when people tell you no, so still going after it. So that was really neat. And so when he was at EKU, he was also involved in ROTC. So he went into the military, and as a dentist going into the military, he automatically got the title of captain. So they deferred his service for 2 years while he was finishing dental school. And so while he was in the military, me and my papa moved to Fort Hood, Texas for a while, and that's where my Aunt Sherry was born. Or no, sorry, that was where my uncle Sheldon was born, and Sherry was little when they were there. And Papa says that experience working as a dentist in the military really helped him get better at his trade. And so he considered a career in the military, but that was when the Vietnam War was beginning, and so there's 2 small children, so it seemed like maybe the best decision not to pursue that. But that's him in his military days. That's a pretty famous picture in our family that gets floats around a lot. But this is them during that period in their life. I'll just go ahead and tell you, some of you know this, but my uncle, he's the baby in that picture. He's obviously a very large baby. And so his name's Sheldon, but what I call him, I never call him Uncle Sheldon, or I never call him Sheldon, I call him Hunky. That's his name to all of his nieces and nephews and siblings most of the time, and his patients, because he's also a dentist. A lot of them just know him as Hunky because that was his nickname when he was a baby. So you can understand why. But it's funny because he does not look like that at all now. He's tall and skinny. So that's just a funny tidbit, I guess. So further on in the Ballou side, how Mima and Papa got located in Cape City, they wanted to be around Columbia, which is where Papa was from, but not in Columbia, I guess. And so a dentist in Edmonton told them he was possibly looking for another dentist in his practice. And so he brought Papa in, and they moved to Edmonton for a while. And so Papa worked for him for about a year, and then he went to start his own practice in Cape City. And I feel like I remember him telling me a story of being in a barber shop or something like that, and people telling him, don't stay here, please stay here, we need a dentist. And so anyway, they did it. They bought a house, and it's a funny connection because it was my dad's great uncle C.G. Coomer that sold them the house that they bought, which I guess that was, I don't know, were you born yet, Mom? So Mom wasn't even born, so that's a cool connection. But they also told me that the original Mr. Houchins that started Houchins Industries furnished the office for a lease, or for a 5-year lease, and so they had good success early on. And so after Papa retired, my Uncle Sheldon took over. So these pictures are when we were, me, Mom, and Papa were moving out of their house in Cave City. So us sitting there for the last time. I think it's right here. Julia, still had her passing. I guess she's past that phase now, maybe not. But Papa's parents were Estill Ballou and Mary Hunter, and that's a picture of them over there. Estill was raised in Cumberland County. There's a long history of farming in my family. Lots of poor farmers that make up my family, but it's a cool thing to see. And Papa also told me another story of when his dad was going to sell tobacco in the Depression, and it's the price that it brought didn't even cover the cost that it took for him to sell it. So, he lost money. That was just a cool tidbit on that period. But this bottom picture is a picture of him. He was known for handing out big, huge Hershey bars at Christmas. And so that's a tradition that my aunts and uncles and my mom remember. So this was Estill and Mary's marriage license, and over here is a note where it says, it's Mary's parents saying, "You please issue a marriage license to Estill. Mary is 17, but we give him the right to marry our daughter," which I thought was pretty cool. Sorry, I don't usually talk this long. So Estill's parents were William Murray Ballou and Maddie Florence Garrison. They met in Kansas, where Maddie was from, and they eventually made their way back to Kentucky. They lived on a farm, lived a very poor farm lifestyle. I'm sorry. So Maddie died pretty early on. I think she was 42 when she was giving birth to her last child, Margie. So this was her. I believe my name did come from her, even though I didn't get to meet her or anything, or my mom doesn't remember her. But I'm not sure how old she was, and I'm guessing early 20s. But I just think those pictures are so neat. And so I actually wrote an essay. I'm struggling. about Maddie. A really strong woman that I think influenced her family for many generations. Lived a very poor life all throughout her life. Just loved taking care of her kids, and just a strong Christian woman that really impacted people that she knew. And so it was cool getting to know her through these documents as well, and just someone that I'm named after, and I think I'm happy to be named after her, even though I was never around her. So her parents were William Garrison and Lydia Case. Lydia, my grandfather has always been interested in case knives, and so I wondered about that because I'd heard of a connection with our family to the Case Knife Company, and apparently there was a connection. Lydia was the daughter of Isaac Case, and Isaac had a brother named Job Case, and Job and his sons and grandsons are the ones that started Case Knives. And so that's a picture of them there. Job and Isaac's father, William Russell Case, was born in Rhode Island, and he was a veteran of the War of 1812. I had no idea about that, so that was a cool find. But it was cool to validate the connection to the Case Knife Company once and for all. Even though it wasn't my direct descendant, I'll claim it, I guess. And so William Ballou, Maddie's husband, was the son of James William Ballou and Lucy Nordup. And so as you can see, the name was changed. The spelling of the name was changed. And so there's evidence that his father was in the Civil War. So I'll finally move on to my paternal side. I had a little less information on them. I just had so many documents from my mom's side of the family, but I still got a lot of connections there. So my grandmother is Carol Carol Smith was her maiden name. She's now Carol Burchett. She grew up on a farm here and has many memories of it that she told me about, like raising a garden, tobacco, and milking cows. And she said her family didn't have a bathroom until she was 8. So it's, they're my grandparents, but I don't think of them as being that old to not have a bathroom. I don't know. So that was pretty interesting. I also call her Meemaw, so it's kind of confusing, Meemaw Carol. But she attended beauty college and opened up her own beauty shop early on, and so she married my dad's father, Donald, during that period. And so, and they had my dad, Jason, and my uncle, Brad. And so after her and Donald were divorced, she took a job with the National Park Service and served after Hurricane Andrew hit in Florida for a period. So that's really neat because, obviously we have that national park connection here in Barron County. When she was 38, she went back to college at Western, and it's funny because she said there was a time when her and both of her sons were both all in college. That's just a unique thing that doesn't happen very often. But then she married my what I've always known as my grandfather, Papa Phil. We call him Phil Burchett. And so my dad was 19 when his father passed away, so I wasn't able to meet him, unfortunately, when he was 43. So this is some pictures. This is me with my dad's side of the family, my uncle and Meemaw Carol and Papa Phil. This is Meemaw, the third in the row right there when she was younger, and then when she married Phil. And so my grandmother's parents were Raymond and Aline Smith, and so that's a photo of them as I remember them. They were all the only great-grandparents that I ever met, and so I loved going to their house, and I just have cool memories of picking berries at their house and the sunroom that they had that had a little bitty slide that we were way too big to be going down this slide that was like this big that we would play on. We called them Mim and Pappy, so that's kind of an interesting name. I don't really know where that came from, but that's how we always knew them. And so I remember fishing at their house, and they had a basketball goal in the loft and the Lincoln logs, I don't know, that we would always pull out. But Pappy died in 2012 when he was 84, and then Mim in 2017. So that's us with them over the years. So Raymond's parents were Leonard Smith and Pearlie Thomas, and he was apparently a veteran of World War I, so I did find some veteran connections in there. And he apparently met Henry Ford at some point when he got a job at Ford Motor Company. In 1928, the family moved out to Cave City, and Leonard was a farmer, another farmer in the family. So Meemaw Carol told me a story of when she was riding in the truck with Pa Smith one day, and a wasp got in the window, and in the commotion, I guess, he wrecked the truck trying to get the wasp from stinging everybody. So that's just a little family story that I got. And so these are some quick little connections in the past. Benjamin Franklin Smith, what a name. But my third great-grandparents, and then Jesse Smith, Jesse and Elizabeth Smith, and then Palmer Smith and Icy Louisa Johnson, which is another interesting name. But I got all the way back to the 1700s on this one, where I found some descendants from North Carolina. So the Coomer side, Aline, which was my great-grandmother, her parents were Emmett Coomer and Ann Lizzie Judd, and CG is one of their children that sold the house to my grandparents. So Emmett's parents were Matt Coomer and Elizabeth Monday, and so that's him with his family. Another really neat picture that I found on Ancestry of all the children. Always so many children in all of these families, especially the farm families. This is another marriage certificate that I found. Just really, really cool to be able to see that, like the handwriting that has survived all these years. So Mac's parents were William Riley and William Coomer and Delilah Keltner, and it's possible that he fought in the Civil War based on a few things that I found, but I wasn't able to 100% confirm it. And this photo is a stone that apparently the descendants erected for them in the 70s, I believe, for all of their children and them. So he looks like a very tall, stern man. They always look very stern in these photos. That was really neat. And so Delilah's father, John Keltner, also fought in the Civil War for the Union. And this is just some information I found in some of the military databases about that and where he was stationed and such. And that's Delilah. I think it's a drawing. I can't really tell. But this is a widow's pension, I believe, that I found or in the event that he left a widow. But so finally, I have my paternal grandfather's side, the Coomers. And so my dad's father, Donald Coomer, was born in 1951 and died in 1995, and he graduated from Park City High School. His parents were Thomas Coomer and Lola Coomer. I never got to meet them, but I always hear like really good stories, especially about Lola. And we always talk about how apparently Julia reminds everyone of Lola, and we joke about how she should have been named Lola because she apparently embodies a lot of the things that she was. So Thomas was another lifelong farmer, and he loved to play checkers around town. And then Lola retired from the pants factory, the Kentucky Pants Factory in Cave City. And my dad always talks about the Sunday afternoon meals that he ate at her house, and that's something that I think a lot of families probably did. That's sort of a lost tradition, I guess, and for some people. But this is Thomas when he was younger, and that's probably them as my dad probably remembers them that way, I'm guessing, in that photo. And so that's where they're buried in Cave City. We go and visit those graves pretty often, more than any other family members I can think of. But my great-great-grandparents after them were Ezra and Mamie Coomer. And that's their big family, I'm assuming, on a farm. And them together. The Coomer family seems to be really into family history because I found a lot of photos and stuff on Ancestry. So I really appreciated that. I'm now part of a Facebook group, I think, just for Coomer family history. But that's all I've got tonight for you. I'm sorry I got choked up for a while. I told you I'm not used to talking this long, I guess, but it was really cool to be able to do this, and I'm glad that Mr. Steenbergen had us do it because I'd always wanted to do something like that, but I guess didn't have the time to really sit and like sift through all these documents, and so I didn't realize how much information we actually had from our families that had just been passed down. A lot of people had done the hard work for me, and so I benefited from that, being able to just pull these little anecdotes and stories about people that I never met. So yeah, it's kind of coming full circle as well, since I'm a student in Columbia at Lindsey Wilson, because every time I turn around, I run into somebody that's either last name Coomer or Ballou, and they're like, "Are you related to so-and-so?" And I'm like, "Probably." I don't know. There's too many of them now. But so I'm back where basically we all started, which is a cool connection now that I'm able to make that I wasn't when I created this presentation. So, but yeah, I wouldn't even call myself a novice genealogist. I'm whatever's below novice. But it was just fun to be able to go back and I was able to like record that whole interview that I had with Mima and Papa, just to be able to keep that information, and I talked about that in the essay that I wrote. But I guess storytelling is something that our generation just doesn't do anymore. I don't know why. I guess it's because of the amount of technology that we have. We just take it for granted. But I found out so much stuff through doing this that I never would have known. I guess I asked questions that I wouldn't have asked about our family history, and so it's cool to see the individuals that have lined up throughout time to be able to put me where I am, you know. And that's something that I always wonder, how did our family get to Cave City if we were from Adair County? Like, we would always go visit our family in Adair County or something. I was like, how are we here then? You know, just like thinking for half a second on those things. So, but yeah, I'm grateful to have been able to do it and just interact with my family in a different way. And I appreciate you all inviting me to come talk about it. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. I may defer to the more knowledgeable people. I joked to my mom and dad before this. I was like, I'm probably one of the least qualified in the audience to be doing this presentation, because half the people that are in it are the people that are here and actually knew the people. But I benefited from being able to learn things about them that they know that they're able to pass on. So that's what I've got. If you have questions, I'll try to answer, but if you don't, that's totally fine as well.
Your grandmother who worked at the pants factory, did she work in this pants factory, or?
I think it was in the one in Cave City, yeah. Yeah, I was up there looking around earlier and I saw that. I was like, wait, was this the pants factory? I'm learning new things all the time, but I was like, maybe that's where she worked, but it was in Cave City, yeah. Yeah. Julian, Hayden, do you have anything that you want to know? Well, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to come speak. I'm happy to do it, even though I know I sort of fumbled through it a bit. It's been a long time since it's a very highly anticipated presentation, apparently, because I did it 2 years ago, and so. Yeah, it was fun to be able to do it and just relearn some of that stuff that I had already forgotten, honestly. But I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. Any other questions for Maddie? Thank you all for coming. Be sure and take advantage of the food truck outside. Katie, the director here at the Cultural Center, does a lot of work to plan these events to keep the museum open until 8 o'clock once a month, which is kind of a neat thing for those who have schedules that don't permit the usual routine. So take advantage of looking around at the Cultural Center while you're here, and Maddie may be found over there in the research room looking up more things, because you know there are a lot more ancestors to go. You just have to find them. And, so thank you all for coming.
Okay. Good job.